Today I'm finally going to review my very first Razer laptop, and it's not even a gaming laptop. I'm talking about the Razer Blade Stealth, the one with the most recent Kaby Lake CPU. I mean, sure, with the Razer Core you could use it for gaming, but since I did not have that one in for review as well, I will review this just as what it is, a thin and light ultrabook, and that's why I will already say let's go ahead and check the design and build quality. One thing gets quite obvious right from the start: it gets quite dirty, a little bit more easy than some other ones due to this powder coating. It attracts quite a lot of fingerprints. I mean, it can be wiped away, but it's not all that easy. But the rest of it looks quite nice because, as you can see here, we also have the logo that does light up once you open it. It is very thin, but it looks quite white, but you will get why in just a few seconds. Otherwise, we have the nice rubber feet on the bottom that actually raise it a little bit and protect it very well from sliding. Here we have the fan intake and also outtake. Otherwise, this would have been pretty much already it for the bottom. On the left side we can see the USB Type-C, which is already Thunderbolt 3, USB 3.0 and the headphone jack. What I like to see a lot on the front is this cutout, and you will see why as well in a few seconds. Now, once again, USB 3.0 and a full-size HDMI port. So all of this really nice. In terms of weight, I really like it with about 1.3 kilograms. It makes a nice and also very sturdy appearance because it does not pretty much bend at all. Very solid construction. Now let's put it on the table, and here is why I like the cutout. Easily accessible, and this is the great thing, the hinge. It can be easily opened with just one hand, and that is something very important for me especially, so I really like to see that. No Windows Hello camera or something like that, and no fingerprint reader, so in terms of security are maybe not the best here, but this is why the device is maybe a little bit wider, because we have these really great speakers that I will get into just a little bit later. But one thing that is quite obvious, we have quite big bezels. So what I would have liked to have seen, maybe that they would have kind of fit a 13.3 inch display in here. Not the case, but at least the display is very great, and I will get into that later. But for now, let's talk about this really nice keyboard, because let's zoom in a little bit. What I like about it is, first of all, the RGB lighting, because you can't really properly see this in the lighting, but of course you have full color RGB, because you can use it pretty much the same way, and I will get into that a little bit later in the software, as any other Razer keyboard, and this is what I personally like to see a lot. Also the travel, maybe not the most deep travel, but it doesn't flex, so it's actually very solid, and the feedback is okay. So I would definitely give this one the upper hand over, for example, something like the Dell XPS 13. So even though the typing experience overall isn't the best one, I could type on it good enough, so I never felt held back. The lighting makes definitely something good. We have nice extra keys, and you can set macros and everything else what you want. So this makes it super powerful. Let's get into it, talk a little bit about the trackpad. I really like that because the surface is great. It's not too sticky and not too slippery, reacts very well, accepts all gestures, super nice, and we get a very powerful software here as well, but I will talk about that later. And that's why I would already say let's get into the display here, talk about that one. So the first thing that I want to go into just real quick are the values, because I did my Spider 5 measurements and got 99% of sRGB, 70% of Adobe RGB, which is absolutely fine. Gamma was a little bit lower with about 2 instead of 2.2, which is kind of the ideal value. In terms of brightness, with about 300 lux, it isn't the most bright one, but usually most people, at least indoors, use it around 130 to 150, and that's where I used it with about 40 or 50% brightness, where we will see we have a great black value here, solid black contrast, and the white point was a little bit in general though on the colder side, but that's not really a huge issue because I liked it, and that's why I want to go into the qualities of this Quad HD 12.5 inch display. What I like here is, and that's why I always already said that the benefit of the Quad HD is you get a noticeably higher sharpness compared to a Full HD display, but you don't get the scaling issues that you get on a 4K display or similar. So between the two versions, I would definitely stick with this one, especially since 170% scaling worked instead of 200, which came out of the box really, really nicely. Like I said, white a little bit on the colder side, but I did enjoy it because it was very uniform. I personally like colder as well though. Now about the white, once again, one thing I want to quickly show, and I don't think you will maybe see this, but you can see some little bit of an imperfection here. Here it has some slight tiny yellow spot, at least on my review unit. I don't think this is something general, and this will be also visible on the black, because the black is really deep and there is no light bleed at all, but due to the kind of small imperfection, this is visible here as well. Colors though, once again, super nice, vibrant, since we have a glossy display, which will make your heart a little bit harder in the sunlight. Vibrant colors and a really great clarity, so it is a top-notch display and I really enjoyed it a lot. But talking about enjoyment, let me go into the sound here, and I will just use it with 80% because otherwise it would be just too loud. Okay, here are my thoughts. First of all, you also get a software to tune that in case you want to quickly see that. Here it would be, just let it load for a second. But you actually don't really need the Dolby Digital software because out of the box what it was already was quite fun. I used the preset one with all those things turned off, just with the volume level. But you can have your own equalizer and all that, so that is great. But like I said, you don't really need it, and then you get pretty much the best ultrabook speakers that I've heard so far. Super loud, because as I said, this was just 80%, and 100% was so loud with such a good quality without any sort of distortion that I never, on this one actually never used my Bluetooth speaker, which I pretty much use on every other laptop. So definitely great here. The headphone jack was absolutely fine as well, so all is good, and that's why I would say let's get into the performance part. Let me quickly show you the SSD values. And you can see about almost 1600 of read speeds with 300 of write speeds. If you get the 512 GB version, the read speeds should be even better. Now let's quickly talk about performance in one aspect, the scrolling with the touchscreen. And of course, if you use Edge, no problem. Super smooth, super nice, top. If you use Chrome, due to the higher resolution, it gets a little bit janky. This is pretty much normal. This is normal for any other kind of touchscreen with an USB. Even quad cores have issues with Chrome. But if you use now, for example, the trackpad, you can see super smooth here once again. And if you use a mouse as well. So only with the touchscreen, it's just not perfect in Chrome, but otherwise absolutely fine. And the rest that I want to pretty much say the same as on any other ultrabook. Photo editing is possible, video editing would be possible as well, but then there will be some issues with throttling, which I will get a little bit into later, but I wouldn't really do this on an ultrabook anyways without discrete GPU and quad core. So for all daily tasks, this gets handled way more than fine, and the i7 wouldn't have been even necessary. i5 would be more than fine, and then you get an absolutely great experience. So all is good fun here. But what I want to talk about now is heat and noise, and I want to start off as always with a little bit of a noise demo. Okay, you heard the fan, and don't get confused that you have seen level 2 but not a level 1, because level 1 is one that pretty much never gets activated. This just spins up once it gets to level 2 and is almost never audible. The one thing that I have to point out, in my normal use, the fan started maybe just 3 or 4 times in my whole 2 weeks of use. So pretty much never. In normal use, it is pretty much completely silent. But there is, after all, an audible coil one that I have to point out, because especially if you open the device and things get loaded up, you will hear some buzz more on the left side. And I think that has to do something with the SSD, because whenever the SSD gets heavily accessed, you hear some buzz. If it's not accessed, you hear some minimal coil whine. I wouldn't really bother about, because that one is mostly audible from like 20 or 30 centimeters, so nothing to bother too much about. But if you are someone who uses his SSD a lot, tasks it heavy, you will notice this buzz. And this is actually one thing that annoys me about my own PC as well. This is something to consider. The fans itself, though, I gotta say, are absolutely okay, because on its highest volume, it is with 44 decibels, a little bit more on the louder side than some other side, but it's a very soothing, kind of subtle sound, so it didn't really bother me too much. And as I said, without load, you won't pretty much hear it anyways. So now the next thing to talk about would be the heat. As already last time, I want to just point out one thing. Here we have the intake, so here it will be a little bit on the colder side, and here on the warmer side, because the hot air gets out. And I had values at about, on the bottom in idle, at about 31 to 32 degrees, and on the keyboard part, so in the inside, like maybe 1 degree less. Now on the CPU side, we had 30 degrees Celsius on max, and on load things were a little bit different, because there on the bottom I had like 33 to 45, here more in the middle where the CPU is, and about 32 to 42 at the center here once again, with though a CPU temperature of about 100 degrees, and it did throttle. This is just something to have to point out, because the maximum turbo speed would have been at 3.5 gigahertz, but what it settled down to quite quickly after already a minute or so was 3.1. In my opinion, still fine enough, and I don't think this is meant to be what it is in terms of performance. Now, let's talk about the battery life. A full charge takes how much? 2 hours and 25. That is absolutely fine, because you're almost completely full after already 2 hours, and that is all good. About the battery life, I gotta say it is absolutely solid, because what I reached in normal use was on average about 5.5 hours, with my lowest being at around 5, but possible are also values of 6 and 6 plus if you use maybe a lower brightness. Like I said, was differentiating 40 and 50%. Even 30 would have been possible though. So in my opinion, it's absolutely solid. Whenever I get solid 5 hours with my normal use, I'm fine. And I know that everyone else could add at least 1 hour more. So good job, after all. Now, let's talk about the software, and here there's actually a lot more to say than on some other laptops, because I really like the additions that Razer included here, because of course I already showed this in terms of software, but what we also get here, of course, is the Razer Synapse software. Like I said, you can pretty much do whatever you want with the RGB lighting on your keyboard. You can set macros, you can set presets, you can set shortcuts, and everything, all of that is possible without any issues. One thing that is also really nice to see though is that if we go into the trackpad settings, which will launch in just a few seconds, as you can see here, you get a lot of extra options to change how the trackpad behaves. You have different kind of gestures, you can really precisely adjust it and so on. So this is great. So as you can see, you have powerful software to control your lighting, your keyboard, and your trackpad, along with the audio. So pretty much everything is covered here, and that is something that I definitely know to appreciate. Otherwise, in terms of bloat, not really much to point out, and that's why I would already like to go to the pros and cons. Starting off here would be to be called out the high build quality. I definitely think it makes a great appearance. It is thin and light, maybe not the most narrow one or most compact design, but after all very portable. One thing that I personally like a lot is that it can be opened one-handed. The port selection is still good, because these days small ultrabooks get even lower in terms of port selection, so this is still okay. The keyboard is absolutely good, and when I say good, I should actually say good enough, which means even more, because the typing experience was absolutely fine and I had no real complaints with it. One thing though that was great to see was the really nice RGB lighting with the very good trackpad that has a great surface. Now, in terms of display, I gotta say what I really liked here was the Quad HD resolution. In my opinion, still the best alternative, and it was, after all, a quite high quality display, besides the small little of quality issue that mine had. The speakers are absolutely fantastic and pretty much the best thing you can get. The performance in daily use was absolutely great, flawless in my opinion, and it was pretty much silent in normal use at all times, which is very important, and all that with a very solid battery life. And like I already said, great software addition in pretty much all the important aspects. Now, what is not all that great? Here, one thing to be called out that is not really not that important is that it gets dirty quite easy. We have quite big bezels after all, so a 13.3 inch display would have been nice, but it is okay as what it is, since it is quite thin and light. Anyways, I have to point out, but it's why it's in brackets, small yellow spot on my display, not the best quality just in this case. We have some minimal audible coin, whine and buzz in normal use pretty much all the time, but that one is pretty much inaudible in normal situations. Where it's quite audible though is when the SSD gets heavily tasked, and then we have high temps that come along with throttling, and this would have covered pretty much all my thoughts. So what are my final words for this laptop? I gotta point out the price now here. I've seen it already on Amazon for around $900 to $1,400 or even a little bit more dollars, for depending on which configuration you get. I would say get definitely the Quad HD version, and in terms of price it was actually quite acceptable, the 512GB version, which should be at around $1,400. And then I gotta say you get a really nice package, because yes, it's maybe not the most compact one, but it's light and thin, so portable. You get the great keyboard, the great customizations, you get a top display, you get a top performance, it looks great, and it doesn't have too many flaws. But like I said, if you are someone who's very sensitive to the coil whine and things like the buzz that is audible, that is a thing. But in normal use it was still pretty much inaudible, especially if you are in a normal environment in terms of noise, or if you are watching a video in the background, you won't really notice and you should not bother, but the rest is on a really high level, because for about $1,400 you get actually way better specs than I expected, because Razer usually is known to be a little bit more on the expensive side, but what you get here for the money is actually absolutely worth it. So it's definitely one of my most favorite laptops that I've reviewed. It's not perfect, but none of them is, and definitely I can easily recommend this if it fits your needs. Like I said, it's not perfect for gaming unless you maybe use the Razer Core as well, and then things could be even better. So that was it. I hope you liked it. Give it a thumbs up, subscription, and otherwise let me know what you think in the comments. Until next time, bye.